It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter back in the basement studio after an extended absence. And during the summers, we sometimes take some time off. I mean, one, it's not always the most news heavy time of the year for Illinois sports, though this year was a bit of an exception with Brad Underwood continuing to stockpile elite talent, which we'll get to that later. But the bigger reason why I didn't really pop on here that much is because I was busy doing another project. Now, for those that follow on Twitter or Facebook, you might have seen this, but I wrote a book, like an actual living, breathing, well, it's not living and breathing, it's an inanimate object, but I wrote a book, a 286-page book, a tome to Illinois basketball. Now, for simplicity's sake, I called it the 200 level. It's got the logo and everything. And the subtitle, if you will, is An Illinois Fighting Illini Basketball Fan's Journey. Admittedly, that's a bit wordy, but I've read up that you want, for search purposes on Amazon and all that, you want to get all the keywords in there. So we got An Illinois Fighting Illini Basketball Fan's Journey. So as a teacher, I get summer vacation, and I love it. I absolutely love it, but I have to admit that I'm kind of itching to get back to school and get back in the routine. And in the month of June, I wanted to start a project, something to keep me busy, something to, keep my mental acuity up. I sound like an old person when I say that, doing the crossword puzzle or something in the New York Times. For me, it was writing. And I started this back in March and April, not the book, but writing again. And some of you have followed our Substack, which is just the 200level.substack.com. Now, that was a nice kind of gateway for me to get back into writing about sports, which I had not done since college. And even then, I was much more focused on being on the radio with 107.1 and the Illini Drive at 5 in its early years. And then as time went on, I did the radio at 93.5, and then I've done this podcast. This is now the 6th season that we're entering as the 200 level podcast. So to return to writing, it was a bit like riding a bike. And the old adage is write what you know. And what do I know? I know Illinois basketball. And I won't claim to be an expert about the sport of basketball in terms of breaking down different offenses and defenses and why things work and why things don't. In that way, I am a bit of a layman fan. But in terms of following a program or a team, there's no team that I followed as closely as Illini basketball. It's been very much in the blood since I was a young kid. And I was looking for an in. I was looking for something to start writing this book with. And I was texting my friends in this group thread, wondering, do I do a basketball book? Do I do a basketball and football book? I figured it would be somehow a companion to the podcast and be an offshoot of the kinds of things that we talk about here. My first hook into this was the 2001 season, which is by no means the greatest Illini season. They didn't make a Final Four, but it's up there. And it was only by the skin of their teeth and some really bad officiating against Arizona that they didn't get to the Final Four. I think I've often said on this program that that team is probably my favorite for a variety of reasons. In 04-05, it almost feels unfair to compare anything to 05. But the 01 team, they're a mix of toughness, the cool factor, Bill Self's first year. I mean, they were one of the easiest teams you could ever root for. And they were right on the cusp of hanging up a Final Four banner, which would have put them in that same company as 89 and 05. But I figured here's a team that hasn't gotten maybe the same attention that the 89 and 05 teams get, understandably so. But they will always hold a special place in my heart, much in the same way that my dad talked about the 83-84 team. And I think a lot of Illini fans of that era would say the same thing. They love the 89 team, of course, but the 83-84 team wasn't all that far behind, and it was a bad call against Kentucky that kept them from also making the Final Four. So the first thing I wrote was a chapter on the 2001 Illini basketball team. And from there, I went back to the Henson years in the 90s and basically wrote it chronologically, all the way up until the last season that we just experienced. As I was writing it and wondering how long this thing's going to be, editing it as I was going along and making sure that, I was staying focused and not deviating too much, but also infusing personal experiences, anecdotes, stories, which are throughout this book. It ballooned almost 300 pages, and I am able to self-publish this. This is the beauty of this day and age with Amazon Direct Publishing makes it really easy to do that. Another website called Ingram Spark, which is how we're doing the pre-order. So this thing's ready to go. It is ready to go. Here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to talk the entire podcast about this, but the pre-order is up now. And here's what a pre-order includes. It includes, of course, a hardcover book, obviously. It also includes the audiobook. You'll be given a download code, and you can download it directly to your devices. The audiobook is almost 8 hours long. It took about a week and a half to get it right down here in the studio. I thought podcasting was tough. There's something harder about reading a book and not sounding, one, robotic, and two, not tripping over your words and having to go back. It's so peculiar that somehow I'm able off the cuff to be as eloquent sometimes as just reading off of a page. So that's what you get, a hardcover book. You get a download of the audiobook, a personal inscription. So I'll sign it. What is that worth? I don't know. I'm not trying to overestimate my value, but I would like to personally inscribe it for those that are doing the pre-order. And you'll get free early shipping. The actual release date of this is October 3rd, but the pre-orders will go out sometime in September, so you will get the first crack at this book and the audiobook before it reaches the masses on October 3rd. And I'm excited. Why October 3rd? It's a Thursday. It's a day off school, which means I can do the promotional rounds. And that's what I plan on doing. I already got some exciting things lined up, including basically an institution in Champaign-Urbana that I'm doing on that Thursday morning that I'm really excited to be hopping on with another local legend and talk about this book. I say another local legend. That almost sounded like I was inferring I'm a local legend. I'm not a local legend. I hope that you enjoy this book enough, or maybe I will be. Now, here's last thing before we get to Illini football, which is training camp is underway, and Illini basketball and the things we didn't talk about this summer. Why did I write this book? And what would make it a success? One, I wrote this book because 2024, the most recent Illini basketball season, did a lot in the way of rejuvenating the passion that I have for this program. But not just that. You already knew the passion was there if you listen to this podcast. The appreciation. And I say that, and to not get too, not wax too sentimental about it, this is something, Illini basketball is something that has been an integral part of my life since my earliest recollections. I mean, since I became a conscious human being, there are very few things I have talked about more with family and friends than Illini basketball. That's the long and short of it. This is something that for people living in Champaign-Urbana, or no matter where you live, to be honest, if you grew up rooting for and supporting this program, you can't shake it. Just like any sports team, it becomes a part of you. And as someone that is a lifelong townie, I have been fully invested in this far more than football for obvious reasons. Football just doesn't give you enough reasons to be invested. Illini basketball does. And this season really rejuvenated that kind of gratitude that I felt, let's say, back in the early to mid-2000s when just donning Illini gear instilled this sense of pride. There is one thing I didn't mention in the book, and it's occurring to me now, this pride that I talk about. It really hit me in 2005, the bragging rights game, so December of 2005. This is Dean James' senior year. And I do write about Quinn Snyder and his fall from grace, Missouri. But I recall distinctly walking around Union Station in St. Louis before that bragging rights game. And yes, we had a Sbarro Diet Coke mixed with a little something spicy. We were college kids having a good time at Union Station, and a good time was had by all. But it hit me with my D. Brown jersey that it just felt good to be an Illini basketball fan. It just felt good. This last season, and that March in particular, and I know what happened to UConn, but listen, UConn was a freak show. No one was beating them. Purdue didn't even really compete with them, and Purdue was elite as well. That's how good UConn was. I can forgive that 30-0 run, mostly. I can forgive it because of what had all happened before that from March 1st on, where your only other loss that month was to the national runner-up. And every other game, Illinois went out there and they won to the tune of a Big Ten tournament title and an Elite Eight appearance, finally slaying that dragon in style of not being able to advance in March. You smoke Duquesne, you get a thrilling win against Iowa State. And it began to occur to me as I was watching these with friends and Isaac, who's both a friend and a podcast partner, and sharing it with not just my friends, but some of their parents came over for the Iowa State game. They were off camera as me and Isaac and Kenton, and then a few buddies were behind us, and we're going nuts in the second half. We got parents off camera having a hell of a time. That shared excitement that we all felt was a big reason why I was like, okay, I need to get something on the page. I want to take this gratitude and pride that I feel in Illini basketball and get it into a book. And the second question, how will this be a success? Because is this going to be a New York Times bestseller? No, it's not. Probably not. Illini fans are crazy, but I do think that I kind of know my role in this media sphere. Okay, I'm not at the level of a Jeremy Werner who works his butt off, him and Derek and Joey, and they are the preeminent media personalities that cover Illini sports. And their following is justly, big. Mine is more niche, right? We have a really great supporting network of people, and it is in the thousands, and this reaches quite a few, right? And it's grown over the last 5 years, now entering our 6th year. But to me, a success goes beyond how many copies I sell. A success would be you read the book, and then it gets to a certain game or a season or a moment, and then you recall where you were at, what you were thinking, what you were feeling, who you were watching it with, where you were watching it, what drink you had, or what food you were eating. I'm talking all the details. I've always been one that really latches on to memories and moments in a very sensory kind of way, and I can just almost transport myself back to certain things. For example, I have a section in here in the Lon Kruger chapter about the 1999 Big Ten tournament run. And I remember where I was for each and every single one of those games and how I felt, especially that Saturday, leaving a neighborhood friend's house where we all watched it, and my dad and I going to a CBS, or it was then Osco, down the street in Urbana, and him telling me, this is pretty special. Like, remember this weekend. And I knew it then. He didn't necessarily need to verbalize it, but hearing it from someone that had been through lean years himself as a younger fan in the 60s and 70s outside of Harv Schmidt, it was pretty bad until Lou Henson got there. It was that sort of cemented, hey, just soak this all in. And ever since 1999, I really do think that was a line of demarcation, and I mentioned it in this book. From that 1999 Big Ten tournament run to now, my fandom leapt. Kind of weird, right, that you would become a huge fan based on a team that only won 13 regular season games, finished 13-18 in the regular season. But that was the year that really hooked me. But then I was able to go back to Henson and the other Lon Kruger years, and then certainly Bill Self, which a lot of time is devoted on those early to mid-2000s. And then the lean years, when it was me, Lon, Jeremy on 93.5, and all the great interns and other personalities that worked with us through the lean years, a bad decade of Illini basketball, and now we're back to relevance. I hope that the timing is right for this book. I hope that for those who order it and read it, that you enjoy it and that you get a kind of relive those experiences, good and bad. I think sometimes it's not terrible to go back to the bad experiences, if only to reinforce how good things are right now. But that's it right here. The 200 level, an Illinois Fighting Illini basketball fan's journey, 286 pages of action. It's got pictures. I mean, it's black and white. I only got a certain budget here for printing, but I mean, there you go. For people on the YouTube stream, you got the whole kit and caboodle right here. Pictures, text. There's me on the back about the author. Had a little venture over to the State Farm Center. I don't know if I was trespassing or not. I wanted to get a picture with the arena behind me. Listen, I've had a lot of fun making this book. I hope that you have half as much fun reading it. Did I say reading or writing? I had a lot of fun writing it, putting it together, pictures, all of that, looking through old memorabilia, getting it in the book, and I hope that it is a comprehensive portrait of the last 30 years of Illini basketball. So that's it for the book. You will hear the tag at the start of each podcast throughout the month of August. Pre-order just ensures that you get it early. $29.99 includes shipping, hardcover, audiobook, personal inscription, all of that. And your support, not just for the book, but for even just listening to this podcast, is much appreciated. It's good to be back, and I am excited that I was able to come back and tell you about this. And now it's time to talk Illini football and Illini basketball, because I can only talk so much football right now because I'm in a weird place with it. Before I get too far, and I know that was one of the longer opening segments that we've done on the 200 level, I am very excited to announce that we have a new sponsor. Before I get to them, I want to thank Steve and DP Doe. I worked with Steve and that fine establishment for a decade. I remember the first time I walked in there in 2013, he was a big fan of T&J, so it was an easy sell. But the fact that DP Doe stayed with us for those 10 years, first 5 years at the radio station, then the last 5 here on the podcast, means a lot, because I've always prided myself on, whether the radio or podcast, working with local companies, local businesses, and helping them out any way that we can. His support was massive. So thank you, DP Doe. Thank you, Steve, for being around for all of that. But we do have a new sponsor that I'm really excited to announce. And I always like being able to talk personally about these places, because I have experience with all of these places, with the exception of one, and I do plan on working with Luke and Owen Builders sometime soon, because we got some home projects. Hamilton Walkers in Champaign, downtown Champaign. So it's known as a steakhouse. That is clearly its bread and butter. But steak, seafood, cocktails, it is my... Yeah, this is objectively true. It is my favorite restaurant in Champaign-Urbana. So it was a thrill to be able to get them on board. I was able to speak with Andrew Libman, who was a big fan of our work at 93.5. So kind to have me, Lon, Harry, and Trevor go in there for a final feast during our last week of shows. And if you go to Hamilton Walkers, you'll see our radio portraits behind the cashier. And to be able to go in there and talk with Nathan, the GM, and start a partnership with Hamilton Walkers. And we have an exciting thing coming up in October to coincide with the book. Hamilton Walkers, though, for my money, is the best restaurant in town. Yes, it does have fine dining. It is a scratch kitchen, which means that everything they make, well, everything you eat there, they make. We're even talking the salad dressing. They don't buy the big jugs of ranch dressing. No, they would make their own ranch dressing. The detail they put into their food, the fact that they actually butchered their own meat. This is high-quality stuff. And you can go everything from the super fine dining, which my wife and I always enjoy doing when we go there. Why not treat yourselves? The service is second to none. But also, if you just want to get a hamburger, we're talking a burger and fries, $21. A burger and fries, and this is no ordinary hamburger. So whether it is a date night, whether this is a pregame meal and cocktails before you go to an Illini football or basketball game, Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, super pumped to have them partnering with the podcast this year, hopefully beyond. And check it out if you haven't already. And if you have checked it out, you know what I'm talking about. So just go back there. Why not? Tell them the 200 level sent you. That sounds like an old radio trope, but try it. We love working with them. And like I said, in October, we'll be back at Hamilton Walkers for a book event with my friend Lon Tay, acting as MC. Also, got to thank our other sponsors. Brian Hansen, State Farm agent, online at brianismyguy.com. Brian pre-ordered the book. Appreciate that, Brian. He is our insurance agent. So for life, auto, home, business renters, you name it, Brian is our guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Also, Owen Builders at owenbuildersllc.com. That is Luke, Owen, and his staff, and these guys are experts at home additions, patios, decks, things like that. If you check out owenbuildersllc.com, you will see a gallery of their work, plenty of options that they can do for your home. And the good thing is, with as warm as even winters have gotten, they can work year-round. So get a free quote for your next home project today at owenbuildersllc.com. And finally, I need to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. They were just here yesterday to do an AC tune-up. Everything's working tip-top, which is nice in this hot, humid Champaign summer. There have been worse, but I have to say this. Living in an old home, it is essential that our AC is like tip-top shape. And with Dogtown working with us for the last 3 years, it has been. So I can personally recommend them. Give them a call at 217. Oh, gosh darn it. I need to get their number again. Sorry, Dogtown. I will pull that up and make sure that we get it right. But Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing is your home's best friend, and I can vouch for them as well. I'm doing this on the fly here because usually I have the computer in front of me with the scripts. I don't. I know this is not the most compelling radio. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Give them a call today at 217-841-4728. Sorry, Cody. I knew that. It was in my head. It was ready to go. Also got to thank Champagne Showers Podcast Network. And got to thank you, the listeners, and the supporters of the podcast. Those that have pre-ordered the book already, really excited about the feedback we've gotten, and this is the official rollout of it here on August 1st. Being August, that means that Illinois football is back. Now, throughout this month, we will do podcasts leading up to the start of the season. I will let you know, full disclosure, the excitement level is not going to be the same as it was last year. I was a little bit unchecked in my enthusiasm. Now, in fairness, I think that they should have had a better season than they did last year. There are a variety of reasons why they didn't, and those, unfortunately, have carried over into this sort of wait-and-see approach that we're taking this year. But I do want to start off by saying this. I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't think they're going to be bad. Maybe this is me playing the new College Football 25 game on my Xbox. I suck at defense, and I've heard this universally. Defense is really hard in that game. Offensively, it's not too bad to be Illinois in this game. And that's because Luke Altmaier is pretty good. Caden Fagan is pretty good. Pat Bryant's pretty good. They don't have Zachary Franklin on there yet for wide receiver. Cole Rusk, I like him as a tight end option. It's been fun getting to play a college football game again. And you could do worse than this Illinois roster. So let's start for reasons for enthusiasm or excitement. The offense. And, of course, the always contingent on, do they stay healthy? Does Caden Fagan play a full season? If he does, I think this is a bowl team. That's how good I think this kid probably is based on what we saw last year. But that is a major what if. We saw the running back room last year was decimated by injuries. All three of your top running backs got hurt. And I guess if you throw Jordan Anderson in there, 4. There might have even been a 5th one that I'm forgetting right now. But if you have a healthy Caden Fagan and a healthy Luke Altmaier, I think that you find your way to a bowl game. Now, things have slightly changed, though. One, you have 4 Pac-12 teams that have joined your conference, 2 of which are, well, one certainly still elite in Oregon. And then you have a USC and a Washington. They're interesting. We'll see where they kind of fit. And UCLA, which I don't know. I don't know if you saw their new coach's press conference at the Big Ten Media Days. An absolute disaster. And UCLA has been in this weird college football purgatory for the last 20 years or so, maybe even longer. I don't think that the Pac-12 teams outside of Oregon are going to dramatically shake up the reality of playing in the Big Ten. I think Washington, as good of a program as they've been historically, and I would never expect Illinois to go out and win at Washington, even if they're like in a down year. It just seems like I don't want to play out west, and we're probably not going to win many of those games. I still think that the overall formula to getting to 6-7 wins is right there. What does that even mean, though, in this new Power 5, what really more Power 4 college football landscape that will probably within the next decade be a Power 2 or Power 3? I'm not sure. Just merely making bowl games, does that move the needle much? But it still counts for something. And until it doesn't count for something, I'm still going to place value on making a bowl game. To me, though, the offense gives you the best path to do that. And in this college football landscape and the way that the game is played now, it does feel like entering year 3 of Barry Lunny with some continuity of the quarterback position, some good skill players, 2 new tackles, especially J.C. Davis on the left side. This should be a good offense. It should be. And it is exciting to go into games feeling like you've got a fighting chance, even if things don't go super smooth on the other end of the field. Like, you won't be out of too many games this year. At Oregon, the closest one to that. I don't see you competing out there just because of how elite their talent is. But at Penn State, I don't know. Think of how you hung in there despite all the turnovers last year. I think you can hang at Penn State. I don't trust James Franklin. I think you can hang with Michigan at home. I really do. And I don't want to discount the fact that Jim Harbaugh is an elite coach. one of the best in college football and soon to be one of the best in the NFL. Just because you replace him with Sharon Moore, the crying doofus on the sidelines who was bemoaning the absence of their cheating head coach, that doesn't mean it's just going to work for them. They won a national title. I've talked to my family that lives up there. They're fine with it. They know they're going to take a step back. They got the national title. That buys them some time and gives Sharon Moore a bit of a leash to work with, right, as the new head coach. But to me, with this offense, you'll hang. The question is, if this is a 28-24 game and the other offense gets the ball with a chance to go down and get the game-winning score, how good are you feeling as a fan? I got to see it before I have any confidence whatsoever in Aaron Henry's defense. I got to see it. Now, the story of the season, to me, is twofold. One is a coach. One is a game, a single game. And I think we'll get answers to both of these relatively quickly. The first question is, can Aaron Henry be an effective defensive coordinator? If not, he's gone. You could argue, as I did last year, that he shouldn't have even gotten a second year to begin with. My biggest frustration, and I was someone that actually thought, hey, Brett Bielema is so in control of his program. He knows what he's doing with Aaron Henry. They aren't going to reinvent the wheel. Just plug and play. It'll be fine. I was wrong. Brett Bielema was wrong. He could have pulled out of this not-so-good arrangement. He elected to go into year 2 with an Aaron Henry. I hope it doesn't blow up in his face. I really hope it doesn't. More just because if the defense is just fine, you're going to win 6 or 7 games. The reason that we're so slow to prognosticate a bowl team with this particular season and this particular schedule is we don't trust the defense. It's not like we're sitting here saying the offense is going to be top 4 in the Big Ten. I don't think that's the case, but I do think they'll be top 8. I think that is a reasonable expectation for this offense that was 3rd in yardage last year, or at least 3rd in passing offense. I think 3rd total and maybe even 2nd in passing offense. They will be effective enough on offense to win games. Can Aaron Henry figure enough things out defensively to just be okay? Because we don't need, and neither do we expect, this defense to be top half of the Big Ten. I certainly don't. You just can't be bottom of the barrel. And that's basically what they were last year. On the heels of an elite defense, and yes, you lost Devin Witherspoon, Quan Martin, Sidney Brown. You can't dispute the massive losses you felt on the back end, especially last year. But you still had a Johnny Newton, an absolute game-wrecking defensive lineman. And you couldn't stop anybody. You couldn't. And it didn't get better. Don't give me the Iowa game, okay, and say, well, you only give up 17 points to Iowa. That's like giving up 40 points to anybody else. Iowa's offense sucked. They had an actual Roblox character playing quarterback for them in that game last year. And who's making the game-winning throws? He is. John Paddock tried his damnedest. I love John Paddock, but if the defense could have for once just went out and won a game last year, you go to a bowl game. They didn't. The defense lost you games. That's the frustrating thing. It's not that it's bad enough that they didn't actually go out there and help you win one. Maybe the Maryland game, they made a stop when you needed them to. But they were more than just a flaw. They were actively losing you games. The Wisconsin game and the Northwestern game speak loudest of all. And yes, there were the special teams miscues. And as much as I loved Isaiah Williams, his special teams miscues put you in some tenuous positions and might have equally lost you that Northwestern game last year. So question number 1 is a person, Aaron Henry. Can he just field a serviceable defense? The jury's out. And this leads to question number 2, because I think we'll know a decent amount about Aaron Henry and how the season's going to go in week 2. The Kansas game. I don't want to put too much import on one game, let alone the second game of the season. But I don't think it is crazy to say your chances of making a bowl game go exponentially through the roof if you beat Kansas. And on the other side, or on the other hand, if you lose to Kansas, good luck making a bowl game, because I don't see a path there. Things change. Some teams are better, some teams are worse. But when you look at the schedule, the back end does open up for you. But if you start off the season 2-3, which is totally on the table, the way the thing's set up, it's going to be difficult. And your margin of error is going to go way down. The Kansas game is so massive for this team and for this season and for Aaron Henry and for even fan interest. It almost shocks me how many people either re-upped or bought for the first-time season tickets. And here I am. I'm like, I'm not even going to the first game. It's a Thursday night against Eastern at 8 o'clock, an exhibition game, and I got to be up at 5:30 the next day to go teach. No thanks. I'm watching in the garage. Sorry, guys, but I'll save my energy for the next Saturday against Kansas. See, this is why I'm not writing a book about Illinois football. If it's Illinois basketball, I'd be there. Or I would make a point, well, I don't care what time tip-off is. I'll watch the whole thing. I need to see it from this football team, and I think a lot of fans probably do too. And by winning the Kansas game, that's the difference between, let's say, 55, 60,000 for the Michigan game or like 48. I do think an early bump, something to indicate that this team is, addressed whatever issues were plaguing them last year, and to be able to do it in game 2 and get some early excitement brewing, I think that's very important. Will they do it? I don't trust it. I mean, Kansas is a borderline top 25 team. Lance Leipold has done a fantastic job. Their offensive coordinator is gone, but Jalen Daniels is not. And what would make it equally frustrating, or maybe even more so, add salt to the wound, would be the fact that if you lose to Kansas for the second year in a row, and I know that's some unfortunate scheduling because they really stunk when you did schedule them 8-9 years ago, you would be losing to the other guy that you could have hired. Your choice is Brett Bielema or Lance Leipold. By all indications, you could have had either one. And as good as Lance Leipold has been at Kansas, Illinois was still the more attractive job going into that offseason. You chose Brett Bielema. I'm okay with that, but I'm also getting a little bit sick, or I would be getting even more sick of missing out on, we should have had that guy. And Lance Leipold, that would kind of loom large. I think it would add a little bit of angst to the season. And maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but imagine Lance Leipold coming in. He is in now his 4th season. Brett Bielema is now in his 4th season. And if he goes 2-0 against Brett Bielema, then what does that say about where your program's at under your guy versus where their program's at with the other guy you could have had? I don't want to cross that bridge. And it's a distinct possibility. The good news is, if you beat Kansas, all that borderline cynicism that I just spewed right there, gone. It's fine. You beat Kansas. And now we're pumped. Genuine excitement going into Central Michigan, an opportunity to go 3-0, and have a little bit of leeway in a really tough start to the Big Ten schedule, which includes at Penn State, at Nebraska, which is winnable, but I do think Matt Rule's probably getting that thing running pretty quickly. Not that they're going to be dominant, not that he's Tom Osborne, but I do think he's at least a serviceable coach. And we saw that last year when they came in here and they kind of embarrassed us, despite not even having an actual quarterback. I forget his name, but he was basically a corn-fed kid from the fields of Nebraska, just slinging it all over the place, and you looked foolish. Brett Bielema addressed the media yesterday, and there was a video that popped up on the Illinois football Twitter account, and he's talking to the team, and they have 25 practices, and he's asking the team, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do to make sure that it counts? And I want to say this before ending the football conversation. Brett Bielema is a good coach. I think his track record suggests that. I think that his overall command of many aspects of a football program suggests that. I think we also recognize that it's not easy to win at Illinois, so you want to give a little bit of grace. The frustrating thing is, as good of a coach as he may or may not be, you do need to strike while the iron is hot at Illinois. Like, your ability to screw up at a football program like Illinois is so much smaller than at other ones. Because in order to get this train rolling and actually get momentum at a level where you can recruit the guys that you need to and consistently go over 500 and make bowl games, in order to do that here, you can't screw up. And since they started 7-1 2 years ago, there's been some screw-ups. And tough, smart, dependable. I think that's the catchphrase that he's used before. They haven't been that for the last 18 games. Is that a trend? Is that the inevitable dip that a program like Illinois will face? You know, I say something in this book about Underwood's early years, that success is rarely a straight line. And it can be frustrating as you're going along in that journey and you're facing these dips. And meanwhile, you're just thinking, wait, why aren't we good yet? Take Io's sophomore year. In December, they lost to Miami at home by they were down by as many as 30 points. They had a comeback, but they fell short. The next game, they go to Maryland. They're up by 20 points. They end up losing by 1. With freshman Kofi and an overall pretty talented roster, and then you're midway through December, you're into early January that year, and you don't know where they're going. I mean, they were not an NCAA tournament team on January 2nd of that year when they got smoked at Michigan State. And then they rattled off like 8 straight wins, right? And then they would have made the tournament had it not been for COVID. Success is not a straight line. I would like to think that this dip in the last 18 games is just that, a dip. And look at the other factor here. With all these close games, and you have as many one-possession games as I think any team in the country in the last 2 years. There's some stat, and I need to dig it up, that Jeremy had found. The problem is you aren't winning enough of those. Is that because you're Illinois and you're still building? Or is that because your head coach hasn't quite figured that out yet? It might be a mix of both. You know, when I say Brett Bielema is a good coach, that doesn't necessarily mean he's great. Maybe he's not a great coach. But I also don't see at this moment, and I rarely have said this as an Illini fan, often I would scold people who would say, well, who are we going to get that's any better? They would even say this during John Gross sometimes. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Or the Lovie Smith. How are we going to get anyone that's better? You mean Lovie Smith, the guy that's not even trying? I can think of 10 names that'd be better than Lovie Smith. In terms of where this program's at in this college football era, this might be the first time in my fandom that I would say, I don't know who else you would get. I think you got to kind of see this thing through. I can always change my tune if things get really bad. I don't think they'll get really bad this year. I think there are some reasons to be optimistic, and that maybe Brett Bielema spent an offseason, and he did allude in Big Ten Media Days that last year he reflected on it, and there was something within that locker room and those football facilities where they just kind of thought they were going to waltz their way to 7 or 8 wins. On one hand, that pisses me off. On the other hand, I appreciate the honesty. Okay, fine, fix it. Fix it and make a bowl game. You know, and I do like that we can go into this year, as opposed to last year where I was dreaming big, 9-3. I said that right before the Toledo game, and then the Toledo first half happened. I said, uh-oh, not good. And yet the rest of the schedule was so Charmin soft that they still could have won more games than they did. Your schedule affords you no favors this year, like last year did. It's not the toughest in the world, but there are just no gimmies. So do you take advantage of it? I hope to God they do. But if not, basketball's on the horizon, and that gives you plenty of excitement. Here's the thing. I love Illinois basketball. There's a reason I wrote a book about them, not football. But I would love to just market the book over the next 2 months, but not really think too deeply about this upcoming season until November, because we'll have 5 months to enjoy this team, and enjoy we will. But I also want to enjoy the fall while Illinois football has a surprisingly good season. 7-5, I'm over the moon. 7-5 with this schedule tells me, you know what? Stabilized. You've stabilized things that were not at all stabilized last year, and that would give me a lot of optimism going forward with Brett Bielema. 6-6, I'm fine, but 7-5, I'm over the moon. We got a whole month to talk about this. I think we'll open up kind of the mailbag as we go through it. We'll probably do 1, maybe 2 episodes per week leading up to the first game. I don't think we're going to go quite as crazy as we did last year. It's just, I can't feign enthusiasm if it's not there. So that wait-and-see approach is kind of informing how we'll go about this month. All right, before I get out of here, Illini basketball, we did have a podcast for Kasparis Ikucionis. I forget. I talked to Jeremy about this on his podcast. I've heard a few different pronunciations, but Kasparis is really good. He's really good. We can see this from the clips. We can see this from the mutterings coming outside of practice and even the clip that they posted themselves. I understand that some, at their most cynical, could say that Alex Legion got a bunch of pub as well, and he did. That is true, and he was not any good. Kasparis has quite the track record already for, I believe, an 18-year-old kid that's been playing ball in Lithuania for a long time. Do not sleep on these European players. They're really good. And Thomas Labavicic is in town too. But we did not do a podcast when Will Riley committed. This was in the middle of my concert swing, and 4th of July holiday was right after that, so we never did come on here and talk about Will Riley, an absolutely massive get. And he is apparently killing it in practice as well. I am not predicting a national championship for this team. I'm not predicting a Big Ten championship for this team. We are going to see how the chips fall, but this team is remarkably deep. And it's a very interesting mix of older guys and younger guys. But some of the younger guys, specifically Kasparis and Will Riley, are very polished. When November hits and we finally see this team in action, we got all these toys that we get to see on the court. We've hardly talked about Trey White on here, kind of an afterthought, but there's a non-zero chance that he might end up being very good, and that this is like the perfect fit for a guy that was a highly recruited high school player who had 1 year out west and then played for a terrible Louisville team, but now he's finally at a program that can maximize his talent. That is all possible. It is also possible that November and December, this team doesn't quite have it together. And if that's the case, that's okay. I think we'll forgive them for that as long as things get up and running when the calendar turns to 2025. I do plan on going to the bragging rights game for the first time in, a decade, I think. Me and some friends are going to head down for that, and we're excited about that. And it to me is just reassuring to watch Brad Underwood operate in the offseason now and continually evolve how he is amassing talent on his roster and continually adapting to this college basketball game. This team is going to have an awesome offense. The defense we're going to have to see. And you know what? We saw that last year. And that was a defense that probably should have been better than it was. But hey, when push came to shove in the NCAA tournament, outside of the 30-0 run by UConn, we can just glide over that. The defense was actually pretty damn good in the first 3 NCAA tournament games. In the Iowa State game, I know Iowa State didn't have the best offense in the world. The defense won you that game. What was it, 72-68? The offense was, hampered by how good Iowa State's defense was. What helped you win that game? The defense, especially when Terrence went out for 7 minutes in the second half. What I mean by this point is defense, because it is very much effort-based, when the lights are brightest, I do think that turns up the temperature on that side of the ball, right? And I think that can actually bode well for a team that even during the regular season is going to have their hiccups. But you just cannot teach offensive skill. You can't teach that. They can get better at it with practice and all that, but just raw talent on the offensive end, you need to go out and get it. And that's what Brad Underwood did this offseason. That's what he did last offseason with the Marcus Damask to pair it with the Terrence Shannon. I don't know if this team is going to be better than last year because Terrence was special and Marcus was special. I don't know if any of these guys can be as individually special as that, especially not Terrence, because that what he did last year is something the likes of which we may never see again in a single season. So let's not poo-poo on that. Is that the right terminology there? Poo-poo on that? Just ignore that. First podcast in a while, I'm clearly rusty. But I do think collectively, the talent that you have on offense makes this a very intriguing roster. And I can't wait for it. I am happy to wait for it if football gives me reason to wait for it. And as I said, the book, The 200 Level, an Illinois basketball fan's journey, will be out, and I'll be doing the promotional rounds for that. So even if football sucks, I'll be able to turn my energy to that in the month of October for the general release as we prep for Brad Underwood's, 8th year? I think this is his 8th year, isn't it? Let me see here. First 2 years were not good. 3rd year, COVID. 4th year, 1 seed. 5th year, Big Ten champs. 6th year, Matthew Meyer and energy drinks. 7th year last. This is his 8th season. We're coming up on a decade of Brad Underwood. And to be entering year 8 of this, if you would have told me back in 2016 when he was hired that this would be kind of the expectation for an Illini basketball team of Brad Underwood's entering season 8, I would have said that is an A-plus hire. Even if you tell me, well, there's not a Final Four yet. Okay, yeah. Or the Big Ten championships, there's a regular season and 2 tournaments. Great. Have they made any deep runs in March? Yeah, they made an Elite 8 run. Okay. Yeah, that's an A-plus hire. Now, can he finally field that roster that will make it to a Final Four? Here's the thing. Last year's roster was Final Four caliber. You were in UConn's bracket. And I think if you were in Purdue's bracket, same thing would have happened. Had you been in Alabama's bracket? I don't know. Had you been in, boy, who was the other one? Alabama, Purdue. Oh, NC State's bracket. Come on. You're in the Final Four, so there's always those breaks that you have to contend with. And not giving up 30-0 runs, of course. But I think overall, this has been nothing short of remarkable. And that is kind of a 180 from where I was a year and a half ago, where I thought we were just running it back. And, what is the future of this program? In a fairly short amount of time, Brad Underwood has illustrated to me, and I think most Illini basketball fans, that he just goes out and gets it done. And now with Orlando Antigua back in the fold, and this staff, seemingly a lot of continuity that you're going to have with these 3 guys, and the money that's being poured into it. I mean, this is the last factor that I'll end the basketball discussion with this. If I am a mega donor, I'm giving money to the Illini basketball program because that is a safe bet. It's a safe bet right now. And in this NIL era, that is massively important. In the Big Ten, I don't know if I would trade places with any other Big Ten program right now. I don't know if I would do that. We could say Purdue. That would be a fair thing to say, despite their more traditional way of maintaining and building a program, roster construction and all that. In that way, Matt Painter is a throwback. We'll see if that still works. And he has been objectively more successful in the last 3-4 years than Brad Underwood. You make an NCAA title game, there's only one other thing you can do other than making the game to be more successful. So don't sleep on what Purdue's done. I know you haven't, because they keep kicking our butt, or at least beating us. And I guess we did compete in the 2 games with them this year. But long-term, I don't know if I'm trading spots with any Big Ten team. I don't. And I don't think that is orange-colored glasses or orange Kool-Aid that I'm drinking. I think that is something that can be very easily argued and backed up. Good place to be in, right? Hence why I wrote the book. All right, so as we end today, again, the 200 level book is up for pre-order on our website, the200levelpod.com. The pre-orders will go through the month of August, and it includes a hardcover book, audio book, personal inscription from me, and free shipping as well. So that is the200levelpod.com. You'll see a button right up top to pre-order the book. And appreciate your support with that. And it will be in local retail stores October 3rd on Amazon and all that. But this would get you the book in September. And, the fact that I even have an audience to be able to talk about this book with means a lot. So thank you for listening and watching the podcast. It's good to be back after an extended absence. And I also got to thank our sponsors. Hamilton Walkers, our new sponsor in downtown Champaign. Steaks, seafood, drinks, high-class joint, but what is great about Hamilton Walkers is this balance between kind of like the high class, you get pampered, the service is incredible. But my wife and I have commented on how when you go in there, you get everything from people wearing like Illini t-shirt and shorts to a couple all dressed up for date night. There's no pretension there. And I know that early on, and I even talked to the GM, Nathan, about this, early on there was this perception that they were hoity-toity. And then they kind of changed a little bit of how they operated. I want to say 2017, 2018. No, there's no pretension there. For as good as their food is, there could be. They could have servers with intercontinental accents and just, really trying to, well, tonight we have. No, they don't do that. It is my favorite place to eat in Champaign-Urbana. If you haven't been there, please give it a try. And if you have been there, go back. because the menu continues to evolve as we go through the next few episodes. We'll tell you what they got on special, but I will recommend the old-fashioned. And there's a lot of good old-fashions in town. If you're a whiskey drinker, you need to have the old-fashioned at Hamilton Walker's in downtown Champaign. All right, also got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Luke Owen and Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. And, of course, Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Cody, I got the number, 217-841-4728. It's back in the head. I got it. Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Appreciate them, and I appreciate you, the listener, the viewer, and soon the reader. Yeah, I'm going to be an annoying promotional shill the next month, but we will also be talking about the upcoming Illini football season. So, good to be back, everybody. Hope you've had a great summer. It is August. It's time to get rolling again, and we will see you soon. It is the 200 level. See you, YouTube.